Welcome back to Creative Outcomes. I'm Jimmy Balo from Upsourced. We're a CFO and accounting firm focused on helping creative agencies. I'm excited to be here today with Kuba, Grajcar, the content marketing manager from ZenPilot. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. How are you doing today?
Thanks, Jimmy. It's really great to get the invite on this show. Super stoked to do it. And in terms of how I'm doing, I mean, this is the highlight of my day. I love to be on podcasts, and I love to, help others out there, the listeners, with any challenges they might be facing. So thank you so much for the invite.
Of course, yeah, we're excited to dive into it. Just kind of like listening to some of your old episodes, just that of guest appearances that you've been on. Just really wanted to have you on and just kind of talk about your experience like at ZenPilot, and really just kind of like understand like, hey, how has the first year been? Like, how did you initially get like linked up with ZenPilot? And just kind of like walk through that journey for you. And obviously for the people that a lot of people have heard about like the Guava Box story or are fans of like the Agency Journey podcast and are familiar with ZenPilot. But for those of the audience members that aren't, like, would love to just kind of like hear a little bit about who is ZenPilot, what do they do, how do they work with agencies, and just kind of the background there as well.
So first of all, alluding to your introvert story that you mentioned there, I'm a bit of a like. There's a part of me that really vibes with what you just said. I've got, some people say, they use the word ambivert. I'm not sure if I would use that about myself, but I'm the kind of guy, and I've done this. I've had days where I spent like the first part of the day, like 8 hours, hosting a company conference, not for ZenPilot, for my previous company, and then the after party came and I just totally closed off in my shell, like I love to get on stage, love doing stuff like this, one-on-one interviews, but I would tell the listeners, it's like if you have that, it's totally okay. People talk about these kind of introvert like social batteries. That's absolutely a thing, and that's happened to me where the batteries run out and then I have to go into my corner, and I left the after party really quickly after that because I was spent. Now, for ZenPilot, for the story behind that, let me take it back a little bit further, but I'll try to be brief. Started my career primarily as a writer, and I joined my previous company, SDX Next, a software development company, basically doing everything. Newsletter, blogs, website copy, social media, sales presentations, and I know there's like a whole discussion about whether marketing should be writing those. But anyway, you name it, I wrote it. And it kind of grew from there. I was lucky to find myself in an industry and at a time where the investment was big into content, and also, the investment at SDX Next was quite strong there. So I got my first direct report, second direct report, became team lead. At the peak point, I had 10 people in my structure, which really helped me learn a lot, not even as a writer, but also as an editor and, as a leader of content people, which is maybe why I talk so much about kind of the mindset behind being a content creator on my previous shows. I mentioned that, and I write about that a bunch on LinkedIn. But within all that, ClickUp came into the picture. I needed to organize the work. I needed some project management software. We were on Trello for like half a year. We were on Asana for I think all of 2 weeks because ClickUp did a very strong SEO play where I was comparing, I don't know what I typed in, Trello versus Jira. I remember comparing two non-ClickUp tools, and ClickUp had an article on that. Here are the pros of one, here are the pros of the other, but by the way, there's ClickUp and it's actually better than both of them. That's how they got their hooks into me initially. I started using ClickUp, quickly became an evangelist. The story behind how I joined ZenPilot is I went to ClickUp to say, make a case study out of me. Like I was so excited about the product, like let me promote you. I need to. The people need to know. Based on that, I landed in an article that they were writing with project management tips. I don't know if it was for agencies. I think it was for marketers. And in that article was Gray McKenzie as another one of the experts next to me. I saw his LinkedIn profile, ClickUp nerd, everything clicked. We started talking, and it took him, I think, a year and a half or 2 years to finally convince me to leave SDX, go to ZenPilot, start my new journey. Since then, it's been quite interesting. So ZenPilot, what they do, the problem we solve is basically project management chaos. if you don't know what your people are doing day to day, if you can't, especially if you're an agency, if you can't reliably talk about your, your workload, your capacity, your utilization, you can't accurately say, like, for example, if there's a deliverable, let's say a blog post, what are the steps towards creating that? What are the time estimates for those steps? Who's responsible for what the handover looks like? What are the what's the required ingredients for each of those processes, for each of your deliverables, or you can't quite structure how you're tracking clients, their health, their status, a lot of problems, right? But ZenPilot helps solve all of them. And the way we help solve that is by putting all of it into one system, a single source of truth. And well, for a few years, that has been ClickUp and ClickUp only. Now we help agencies, whether they want to build that on ClickUp or within teamwork.com. So those are the two platforms that we find can actually handle everything an agency has to do, everything an agency has to keep on record and track, week by week, month by month, quarter by quarter. So that's what we do in a nutshell. And my role within that, like I mentioned, I had a team of 10 when I was leaving STX. I joined ZenPilot and I basically got involved in content. And it's a much smaller organization. It's a much more, I would say, scrappy operation. Honestly, I've been loving it. The speed is awesome. And there's so much that, like, I've learned about myself, and I had to go through this journey of, I had people I could rely on. I did training, mentoring, I gave them feedback, all that leadership stuff. And all of that went away. I had to kind of relearn to become an individual contributor at the same time when AI was coming into the picture. So the expectations for output for a single content marketer are so much higher now because you've got Claude, you've got ChatGPT, you've got all these other AI tools. Love to get into that at a kind of later point in this podcast. So this has been an interesting journey. And now it's December at the time when we're recording this. Time to kind of reflect. I've been at ZenPilot for over 9 months now, and there's a ton that we managed to get into place, a ton that we managed to learn and to do. And personally, it's just been such a huge growth journey for me and for the brand. We've managed to have some really big hits in the previous months. And the pipeline's looking quite nice right now. I would say, just finishing, in the agency space, there's been a bit of turmoil this year. I think everybody felt that. I mean, you're dialed into that. You must have heard about it. But this end of the year period, at least for us, has been really, really strong, which I'm super happy about because it shows that content is usually a long-term play, and it's been paying off big time for us.
No, that's amazing. I mean, you hit on a lot of things there, and I I love it. And there are obviously like a couple of different directions that I want to go. Like one of the things that I'm just personally curious about, and like just kind of like following along with your journey over the last couple of years, is when you primarily when ZenPilot was primarily like getting started and kind of like transitioning over into like the space. They were primarily working with ClickUp, and over the last 12 months, maybe the time frame is a little off there, but you've transitioned to kind of like opening up to the teamwork as well. How has that been? Like sort of like what has that looked like from going from like primarily using like one, being so tied to kind of like one platform, to kind of like opening it up and sort of like working in with both platforms and kind of like broadening the types of users that you typically bring on?
It's been interesting, especially since at ZenPilot, I managed to be a lot closer to the whole marketing branding strategy compared to my previous larger company when I was a little bit removed from those conversations. What's interesting is obviously it makes you think about your identity. It makes you think about your branding. Previously it was quite easy to explain ZenPilot, the number one ClickUp shop, number one ClickUp consultancy, basically. Now, we still lean into that, and that still is very much our reputation. I would say, I think it made me think of channels. And one way to execute this kind of shift that I've seen here and that I can talk about in terms of if anybody's thinking of branching out to, we've been doing HubSpot, but we don't want to do, I don't know, Salesforce. Does that happen? That people do both? Is we basically compartmentalized it into channels where with ClickUp, we lean more into inbound content, I would say. We've got quite a few ClickUp-centric events With teamwork, it's much more of a partnership play right now. I mean, play might not be the right word, but their partnership department, and especially I want to give a shout out to Logan Lyles, who's been great working with us and, getting our experts on their events, doing stuff together, promoting each other. He's he's always on me when I'm about to publish the first class operations newsletter from ZenPilot, and he's great at this and very diligent as a marketer. Like, here's another event that we're doing. Here's another piece of content that you might promote because you want to help people become better agency operators. And that's the second thing here, I would say. So thinking in channels and kind of thinking this channel is going to go primarily to one, that channel is going to go primarily to other. That's one. Second, is we started thinking a lot more about kind of the persona, I would say. I mean, that's always been there, but now we lean more into that, We would no longer talk about like we will make you the best ClickUp team in the world, or we'll make you get a lot done in ClickUp. We started using the words agency operator a lot more. You'll become a great agency operator with us. This ties into operations. This ties into running the business in general. Being cognizant of the numbers, making sure that you're process driven, and you help your teams be productive and also happy. And focusing on that persona, the tool becomes secondary to that, right? And we've got two great tools that can help you achieve it. Probably there's more out there. We're focusing on those two because we want to be world class in both. And so that's been the shift of we're talking about kind of the kind of person you want to aspire to be, and we help you get there. That's is how I would summarize that.
Awesome. Okay. No, I love that. And one of the things that you just mentioned there that I want to unpack or just kind of learn a little bit more is, like, you mentioned the ZenPilot newsletter, the first class newsletter, and obviously, like, the team at ZenPilot, Gray, they had been kind of like sort of honing that newsletter previously, and then you kind of came on board and you sort of rebranded it, and you sort of like took over like the hosting responsibilities. Like, how was that process? Like, what did that look like? Were you initially kind of like interested in doing that? Like, was that something where you said like, hey, like, I'm really passionate about this and I kind of want to, like, as I'm sort of stepping into this new role, want to take this over? Or where did that mindset come from? And how has that, what was it like kind of like reestablishing and sort of like rebranding an existing newsletter as opposed to kind of creating it from scratch?
That is such an awesome thread to pull on, and I'm glad I'm getting that question. I haven't had a chance to dig into that to a large extent yet on a podcast, so thank you. Where to start? I mean, the origin story behind it is that, yes, as I was coming into ZenPilot, Gray mentioned that there's this newsletter called The Dispatch, because that's what it was called at the time before it was called First Class Operations, before I rebranded it. And basically, that was one of my goals. I would say given to me by Gray, but we both agreed kind of from the word go that there would be changes coming to the newsletter. And the previous edition of the newsletter had a lot going for it. See, like, one big shift, and this is something that I only started thinking about shortly before joining ZenPilot, is that newsletters have hosts now. That's a relatively new thing from what I've observed. You used to have these brand newsletters, right? And it was the voice of the brand, which made it kind of bland. Didn't mean to make that rhyme, but but here we are. So from the word go, I knew that I wanted it to have a face and I wanted it to have a voice. And I'm really grateful that I got this opportunity from ZenPilot and from Gray to get basically, carte blanche in terms of, okay, make it your own. And that has been crucial to making First Class Operations what it is. I share my favorite music on there. I share anecdotes about my grandma on there. And some might say, and definitely there's an argument to be made that that's bloat, right? That it does make for a longer read. Okay, you have to kind of sit down with your coffee, and I'm trying to make it more digestible, clear sections, etc. And there's still work to be done there. But why do that? And I think this is, in my mind, this is about building affinity and attachment, and to basically prepare a moat for the other newsletters that are going to come, that are going to be all brand, all AI. I've seen them happen, okay? They're happening right now. Of course, they're super efficient to produce. Of course, you can punch in, your event descriptions and your blogs into ChatGPT and just make it spit out, like a passable newsletter of here's our new content, here are upcoming events, send. Done, right? But I don't think that's gonna stick. I think this is what's gonna get, unsubscribes from from people. And in the age of AI, I've said that on previous podcasts. I'm gonna say it here again. Personality is your moat, and only strong personalities are gonna kind of stay above water. Salient personalities, and people are gonna. Okay, I mean, we're about to be like flooded with content, right? All sorts of content. I mean, you think of any long tail keyword, there used to be like 5 strong articles about it. There's about to be 500, okay, 50 at least, because they're so easy to generate, right? But there's only going to be a few with personal anecdotes, with strong opinions, with actual case studies, actual experience. People are going to be gravitating towards that, which is why I made first class operations extra personal, just so that there's this additional, that people find something there that they will never find anywhere else, because nobody listens to like power metal and retro video game soundtracks, and that element is always there. Arguments to be made, and there's thinking to be done in terms of the length of the newsletter. It is quite long, and I've experimented with making there's this and that's the second thing. The dispatch was, the name. I thought, I Googled the dispatch newsletter. There's a couple. I wanted something unique, and I wanted to lean into the brand, ZenPilot. So, it makes you think of airplanes and flying, etc., which is why we called it first class operations. The header image looks like this ticket, That was one of the earliest elements there that I knew I wanted that. And our designer, shout out to Ian for designing that, did a great job there. And that's another thing. I wanted to give it some unique flavor. Flavor's been a big word for me this year in terms of content. So, you've got these quirky heading names like Captain's Address or What's on the Radar. And by the way, coming up with these headings, actually, ChatGPT helped me with that. I used it to brainstorm, to generate ideas. I'm not saying don't use AI. It's great in that respect, but just don't use it to write the newsletter itself, start to finish, because that's not gonna fly, so to speak.
No, I completely agree with you. And like, obviously, like first class operations is definitely like one of, like, when that email comes through and like the newsletter hits the inbox, it's definitely something that I pay attention to and listen to. And I think that having like the personality behind the brand is so important, and it's something that like I've seen you guys at ZenPilot sort of like lean into, whether it be in the newsletter or on the YouTube channel. Like, where did that strategy come from, or like what made you guys, like, from like the marketing side of things, say like, hey, this is something that we want to invest in, and like this is going to be like a priority for us, like as we kind of like develop our marketing plan for the year?
Great question. So it came from a few places. I feel like this is a typical story for companies in general, agencies in particular, where initially you strongly associate the personal brand of the founder or founders with the brand that they're building. Oh, this is Gray's company, this is Jimmy's company, right? This is Kuba's company, etc. And then as you grow, as you scale, the founders aren't able to get so invested into like every piece of content anymore. So they might get a ghostwriter, but it no longer sounds exactly like them, or they might want to lean more heavily into the brand. Maybe they want to exit the company at some point. So it becomes a problem. And up until recently, this problem, I think, what I've observed, it was solved, one might say, but not entirely, by leaning more into the brand. It's the exact same thing as with the newsletters, right? And I think when people saw this huge wave of AI coming, many came to similar conclusions as I did. That to protect from that, to not get lost in the noise, we need something more personal. So the actual story behind that is, as I came in, I knew I wanted more personality in there, because I thought this is, where things are going, and this is how you push back. I've seen it done to great effect. And I've also noticed, like, I looked at my own personal content consumption habits. I watch a lot of YouTube, okay? And not necessarily about agency operations, just a lot of YouTube about random stuff, culture, about content, movie reviews, etc. And what I've noticed is that I gravitate towards personalities, not so much as, as particular subject matter. I want to hear about this particular thing, but also about from this particular person, That's what resonates with people. And I knew I wanted more of that. And I saw some great brands doing, these kind of attached personal brands, evangelists, you might even say. So Logan Lyles and Teamwork is a great example. All the stuff that Lavender is doing was also a big inspiration for me, because they've got these big personal brands just attached, and it's been working really well for them. So that's where all this came from, basically. And the framework that I've got in mind is, I don't think of like we didn't have a lot of like workshops about the ZenPilot brand itself. The starting point for my whole mental framework here has been that the brand is the sum of the personal brands involved. So the initial brand is the sum of, in our case, Gray's personal brand, Andrew's personal brand, kind of both influence the ZenPilot voice. And now, with me coming into the picture and taking over some of the content series, definitely with Jeff Cypher coming into the picture, our head of marketing, productivity professor, who's put out so much content this year. And so now he's part of the ZenPilot brand too. And I think the strongest move we've made, I also have to mention Maggie Cornarians in there as well, because she's been doing also YouTube videos, a lot of LinkedIn, and she's been a guest on my live streams and webinars, and it's been great. So like, you hire people to be a culture fit, right? To fit kind of the type of company you want to, they need to speak in the same voice as the company. If you've done that diligently, then in my opinion, it makes sense to put them in content seats, so to speak, to give them a voice, to let them show their faces. And as long as we fit the ZenPilot brand, and whatever comes through us, people are gonna get attached to us. They're gonna understand that there's a whole company of people like it, and they're gonna form affinity with the brand as well. So we're pilots, we're ZenPilot people, and that's been the thinking. Lastly, is some of it is also a tactical play, I would say. Plain and simple, on LinkedIn, when you log in every day, you're going to see personal profiles. 9 out of 10 posts, I would argue like 29 out of 30, you're going to see personal profiles. Okay, so we had to have somebody be the face of ZenPilot. We could have leaned more heavily into Gray, but we decided to split it out. It's also kind of more efficient, where Jeff has a strong personal brand now. I've been strengthening mine over this year. So now we have a lot more voices, a lot more. You can have, with a few personalities in the picture, you can just put out a lot more interesting stuff. And some people are going to come in through my personal brand, some through Jeff's, some through Maggie's, some through Gray's. It just creates a lot more surface area, that you can influence.
Mm-hmm. No, I love that, and I think that they're so like obviously like both Upsourced and ZenPilot like primarily just work with agencies, and I think that a lot of agencies are producing content, whether it be newsletters or podcasts. And one of the things that like we've seen and like we've been thinking a lot about is like, hey, like we're doing these podcast interviews, whether they be like an interview like this or like an internal episode where we bring in on a couple like subject matter experts from our team, and they're talking about a particular type of content or a particular type of philosophy. Like, I think one of the things that we're discussing and like trying to kind of like work through internally is like, hey, like we've got all this great content, and you publish it on YouTube or you publish it into like the podcast app, whether it be Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And then a lot of times people will publish it and then not do anything with it. Like, I know that like that's something that like you've been sort of developing, and you've been kind of thinking about like, hey, like I'm kind of creating this framework of like what to do and like the best way to kind of like repurpose podcast episodes. And do you mind just kind of like elaborating on that, or like walking us through sort of like your thinking there, and sort of like what you have in store in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I cannot divulge this. Please book a consultation with me, starting at $100 per hour. No, of course, I would love to talk about this. So this has also been like one of the, again, it's December. It kind of makes me reflect. One of the big challenges, or like, I love to use the phrase, it's a good problem to have. So here is a wonderful problem that I encountered as I was joining ZenPilot: agency journey. A podcast with over 200, closing in on 300 episodes. And Gray has been working for years. I should say Gray and Andrew. Gray's the primarily host, but Andrew hosted a lot of it in the past. They've been working for years, getting great agency influencers and leaders, big names. Zeb Evans, the CEO of ClickUp, on the podcast, and that was just one example. and getting them to share. Zeb was sharing about ClickUp 3.0 kind of very early in the ClickUp 3.0 story, and we got actually quite a bit of traffic by featuring him on the show. What to do with that, And also, as I came in, Agency Journey and another podcast we spun up, Agency Breakthrough, where I had the great pleasure of hosting some of my personal content heroes like Marcus Sheridan and James Carberry. Shout out to both of them if they're listening. What to do with all that content, and also in an efficient way. Tiny content team, huge backlog of content to repurpose. What to do? Thankfully, I am currently, we are all currently in the age of AI, and I found some ways to leverage that, but also use a little bit of an old-fashioned approach. So to get into this, and this is something that I really wanted to kind of to sell to people on a podcast episode. Glad I'm getting a chance right now. I talk a lot about mindset, right? So the mindset I came with here is I want to build a content engine. It's been said, right? And it's not an entirely novel idea, but if I'm building an engine, I thought, then I need kind of parts of the engine that work, and I need kind of glue between the engine that passes, whatever comes through the engine in a rapid and smooth way. So I'm a big fan of the book Who Not How. It's kind of written by Benjamin Hardy based on the thoughts of Dan Sullivan. Really, really recommend that book. It's one of my favorite ones. In there, it's, the main thought is find your unique ability, find what you're best at. For everything else, find people who can give you advice, find people who can consult, find people who can do it for you, where, they're in their area of like optimal ability, you're in your area of optimal ability. I'm really good at reviewing content. I'm quite good at giving feedback. I know what I want. I've got the vision, but I'm not a video editor, for example, right? And I knew that one path I could have taken is to pick up those skills, start editing the podcast episodes myself, and that would have been a path towards ruin, honestly, I think, in hindsight. I decided, against that, I decided to devote a little bit of the budget towards finding people who would take over different parts of the production pipeline. And this is one of my key insights from this year. Form small modules of the engine, build it bit by bit, and assign, I would go as far as to say assign one person per one kind of stage of the project. So what we've got, revealing kind of what's under the hood, we've got one person external via Upwork that does only long form podcast editing. Input, raw recording, output, ready for YouTube. And that's all they do. And we've got quite a few recordings. Like I mentioned, we spun up a new podcast, Agency Breakthrough, right? So there were 2 formats to play around with, and that created complexity in its own already. Right now, we're leaning more into Agency Journey. It goes really fast. I order it, literally this happened this week. Ordered on Wednesday, received on Thursday, and it's perfect. I do not have any notes on the editing. That is and it took a while to get there, briefing, feedback. But once you have that one person dialed in, it becomes almost like you almost need no words. Here's the link, here's the person, here's their like company logo, you get the output the next day. One person content team needs that simplicity, needs that speed, okay? Then it's really useful right now. And, honestly, I mean, obviously there's going to be saturation at one point, but short form vertical video is very big right now, has got good organic distribution for B2B. I would say it's still kind of underutilized, although people are leaning more and more into that, right? So a whole separate person just for short form clips, So once you have that initial long form episode, pass it to another person. Well, they get the raw recording, but it's the next stage, okay? For short form clips. And again, with that one person, dial in exactly what you want, dial in that one content format, and you're golden, because it becomes just so much faster, right? And also, like on a personal level, I'm motivated by people kind of waiting on me to, to give them the next batch to work on. It really helped me kind of just create more motivation for myself. Like I mentioned, I used to have a 10-person team, right? When you've got people relying on you, you get really productive. I didn't have that, being very nearly an individual contributor here at ZenPilot, so I kind of created that problem for myself, and it actually worked out very well. But it goes even further than that. you might say, okay, once you have these shorts produced, and again, quick turnaround time because we've done a few batches of these together, having it dialed in is a great feeling. What to do next? You got to publish them. And you might think, okay, tiny bit of work, and I just need to go to the platform, write some clever copy, go ahead and publish that. But actually, when I looked at the volume, right, and I really want to have some strong volume there, I want to test kind of for each episode. I've got like 5 to 7 clips. I want to see which parts of each episode resonated the most, right? So I want to publish all of them. I want to measure results on all of them. I want to publish them on multiple platforms. So one episode might be 7 shorts, multiply that by, we've got like 7 social profiles. I could let, some of them like X, for example, which don't use a lot, I could let them lay barren, right? Then I came upon 2 things. Well, first of all, I remembered who, not how, and I thought, okay, I might task somebody with just publishing all of these shorts, right? Because when I sat down to do it, it turned out that it actually eats up, quite a bit of time, especially when you think about the copy, kind of the micro copy for each clip. And second, I discovered Agorapulse. Big shout out to Agorapulse, because that tool is just amazing in terms of keeping your socials in sync. And now, I didn't think it would be possible coming in, but now like every day, 8 a.m. Eastern, we got a short coming out on all the profiles all at once. I made some concessions in terms of the copy is not super flashy. The LinkedIn profiles, because of API limitations, don't tag the guests, for example. So I might have to go in there and kind of tag the guest myself in a comment. These are small concessions to make to make so much content publishing happen at, first of all, at the click of a button, and second, through another person. So I just go to another person, pay them an agreed upon price, and that happened this week, and I've got content scheduled till the, I think, 5th of January. So like 15 days of shorts happened. So, that's the who, not how approach. And that's what I really recommend. I would say don't go with, somebody who's like a jack of all trades, or they say, oh, we can handle the whole end-to-end process for you. It is more upfront work, but find a single person for a single format, for a single, it's also more kind of it's more, how should I say this, future proof. If one piece of this engine for some reason, it starts to not work out anymore, they, I don't know, want to do something else, or they move into different kind of work, you just switch out one module in there. So that's one.
Are you primarily like sourcing, like, are you doing all of this sourcing on Upwork, or like how are you going out and like finding like, hey, like this person would be great for these shorts, or this person would be great for like the long form like podcast interviews in terms of like the editing?
Yeah, so Upwork has been great in that respect. I haven't used it a lot in my previous engagement. I did not use it a lot in my previous engagement, but here and here also I had a little AI moment in there, because my blocker was like I couldn't work out all the details of what to put in the job description, but ChatGPT did such a good job of it. I gave it like a few sentences of I've got podcast episodes. Like I typed it the way I'm saying it right now. I've got podcast episodes. I need shorts. This many shorts. I'm willing to pay this much money, and also what else do I need to keep in mind? And it spit out the whole thing, and it made me learn about ID3 tags in podcasts that they need to be kind of included in there. So yes, I mean, the short answer to your question is I've sourced it primarily through Upwork, and it turns out maybe because of the pressure that AI is putting on the market, actually there's great people there that for companies or smaller orgs that have got a limited budget, that you can find a fit there. Definitely need to do more work upfront on kind of screening the candidates, and there's a lot there to sift through, but there are total diamonds to find there. Has been my experience.
Okay, no, I love it, and I think that's really like an just awesome advice that I think that a lot of like agencies can use, just because they're in a similar boat where it's like, hey, we may not have like a massive team, or it may be the owner that's wearing a bunch of different hats, and one of those hats is the marketing hat. And I think that part of it is like, hey, just how can we be as efficient as possible? but still do a good job on delivering like high output content. Okay, so I want to switch gears here. And one of the things, like, as I was just kind of like doing some research and just kind of prepping, one of the things that stood out to me was the fact that, yes, you are a marketer, you're very passionate about marketing, but you're also really passionate about coaching and mindset. And I kind of want to like take us off in like a different direction and just kind of like dig into that a little bit. And I think that one of the things that I've heard you speak on previously that really resonated with me, that I think is like really just true, especially as a lot of people are just reflecting on 2023 and planning for 2024, is like, hey, as an agency owner, as the agency operator, like your mindset and the way that you're kind of like showing up and going into every single day, like, is so important and matters. And your team is just kind of like watching and looking, and like it has a huge impact on like the entire org. And I would love to just kind of like understand like do you have any tips or like any thoughts as agency owners are kind of reflecting and sort of planning for 2024 and like what that looks like? But then also just like on like a personal, like where did that passion come from? Like, how did you kind of like get into that? Like, how did you sort of like say like, hey, this is something that like really like piques my interest and something that I'm passionate about? Have you always been that way, or like where did that kind of come from? I know that's sort of like a lot to unpack, but feel free to kind of go in either direction.
That's great. Well, the first beat of that story is I was around 20 years old and I picked up the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And there's a lot of stuff that happened kind of around that. I was in college. Went to a few meetups of people interested in their self-development. Previously, I really wanted to become a writer, and that also involved a lot of the mindset stuff of like being a creative. But the 7 Habits book has this part in it where it asks you to imagine your own funeral, and that's a classic, I think, in coaching. I've had somebody reach out to me just this week with a similar exercise, like, I'm going to send you an email with a questionnaire. Imagine it's my funeral. What are the best parts of me that I can then use to develop my career? So not super unique, but that was the first beat of that story. When I imagined, my kind of end of the road, I really wanted to become a person that helps others unblock themselves, helps them resolve the challenges that might not be related to, not their business strategy, but just on a personal level. To get more done is maybe prosaic, right? But to just reveal and unlock their potential. I spoke about who, not how. I spoke about this unique ability thing. I would love to help more people find and leverage their unique ability. And this, for me, this ties everything together, because to find your unique ability, you need to know yourself and explore yourself, but also to kind of to stay in there, you need a who, not how approach of finding others to support you and kind of deliberately becoming part of a network instead of trying to stand on your own. So you can see I still have a lot of passion for it. My professional life definitely took a turn towards marketing, but then when I became a leader, suddenly that became important. And during every recruitment process, I actually asked, like, what is the one thing, couple of things that you really enjoy doing? You feel like a superhero when you're doing that. You could do that all day for no money, and kind of growing and getting feedback in that one area is something that you love to do. Because for some stuff that we do, we get feedback and we're like, okay, I'm doing my best. For others though, like for public speaking, I'm always open to public speaking feedback, because I want to be the top of the top for that. Okay, that's what I'm passionate about, really, really passionate about. And it goes back to my kind of Toastmasters experience. I spoke about that on other podcasts. So this is where it kind of came from, and I feel like this is not talked about enough in the marketing or like the creative space. People talk a lot about channels, strategies, what to do, what not to do, kind of where to invest your time. Uh, Also about, there is quite a bit of, you need to understand your customers, talk with them, have a lot of touch points with them. This is great advice, and novice marketers need to hear that. But not enough is being said about how to do the creative work of marketing, or how to do the mental work that just helps you show up as your best self each day and to actually get the work of marketing done. like I'm in touch with marketers. I speak with my friends who are marketers, for example, from my former team, and I see the posts on LinkedIn. Like it has been a tough year for marketers. Some of the agency space is saying that as well. We're being challenged in a big way by AI. How do you stay excited about the discipline when there's so much more commodity content, copycat content, AI generic content? How do you stay excited? How do you kind of keep pushing against that? At the end of the day, it's an issue of motivation. So I dug deep into that. And I don't want to say coined the phrase, okay, but kind of the framework that I've been telling people about is like how motivation versus why motivation. And the social channels are filled with how motivation. It's really temporary, short term of, okay, here's a framework, just follow this framework, everything's going to be fine. And then it turns out that you actually need some inner fuel and inner fire to do the work of following the framework. And this, for me, this has been something that has always like ebbed and flowed, So I'm trying to solve my own problem here of like, how do I make that fire, that kind of that drive become consistent, and how to make that actually last and to make it stick. That, in my opinion, lies in why motivation. And for that, you need to go inside, you need to go deep, and you need to think about like how to discover you need to discover your values. This is an exercise that I recommend to everyone. Look back at your whole journey, your life, your career, and really look very closely at the peak moments. Look at the moments when you felt like you were on top of the world, when you got great feedback, but also you felt like you were in the right place, right time, utilizing your best skills. You were using your unique ability to the fullest extent. And just ask yourself, why was that so important for me? Why was this such a peak moment for me? What does that tell me about myself, and how can I get more of these moments? Because people notice. People notice when you're doing your best work, and that's what they begin to associate you with if you only do it often enough and talk about it often enough. So, like my big motivation is that I see a lot of people who are getting in their own way, often myself included, to be honest, and I just want people to unblock themselves and to be in this area of like top, not efficiency, but like when they feel the happiest and they have the most impact. I want them to help them be there the most, and that's what I've been writing about, sharing about, and that's why this issue of mindset, in my opinion, is so important. We're a lot of us marketers, like I mentioned, we're creatives, and this always will require, no matter the tools, no matter kind of the, no matter how much you can lean on AI these days, you still need to find that inner fire to keep going. And there's always an element of vulnerability involved in that, and you need to push past fear. And I want to help more marketers, more creatives, more people just push past that.
No, I mean, I think those are all really good points, and something that I agree with. I think that when that upsource, like when we're working with clients, like one of the things that like we always talk about and like really try and like understand is like understanding who the partners or the business owner is as like an individual. Like that's very important to us, and like something that we want to unpack and get to know them just like as humans, just because like the finances are so personal, and it's something where it's like, hey, like the business is so closely tied to like who you are as an individual. And like a lot of times people like are putting their like as like an owner, putting their like blood, sweat, and tears into these businesses, and like it's not something that like we take lightly, and something where we're wanting to come in and understand like, hey, like who are you? Like, how did you get to this point? And like, where do you see this business going? And like, how can we help you get there? And not just on the surface level, but like going a layer deeper and understanding like their why, and like why did they start this agency in the first place? And like, what gets them excited every day and like gets them like out of bed and like motivated to continue to show up. Just because running an agency and running a small business is really hard. And like, you have to have this just like inherent like extra motivation, where it's like something that like is just like in your blood, like something that you're like super passionate about, because it does take a lot of effort, especially as you're sort of like similar to what we've been saying a couple of times throughout this episode, but like 2023 has been really hard for a lot of agencies. And I think it's one of those things where it's not always just going to be like great times where it's like, hey, we're winning all this work and we've got amazing clients, and like it's client service. It's really hard. And I think that in those tough times, like you have to do a lot of reflecting and figure out like, hey, like why am I doing this? And like, am I passionate about this? And like, what is continuing to like have me like continue to move forward? And so I think that really like rings true and is really helpful and great. So
Yeah. Could I throw in one more piece here? I've noticed that this applies to a large extent to the ZenPilot story as well, to how we work with our clients. Like you might think what we do, project management, setting up tools like ClickUp, it's all systems and architecture or the hierarchy, spreadsheets and maths. But when you dig into that, the main hurdle to overcome here, or like some of the main hurdles, is like the mental hurdle of, okay, I need to do the work that's important but not urgent, the long-term stuff that will set me up for success. So like this is the work that our clients kind of already have pre-made as they go into the door. I almost feel like we should be congratulating them just for booking that call with us, because that means they have this long-term thinking. And then I've seen it happen so many times. I've seen it happen at my previous company with ClickUp. Like there's so much to do in the change management space. You need to be persuasive. You need to capture people's hearts and minds to get them to change their project management tool and to use it in the proper way that allows you to get the data and the visibility and the efficiency that actually you can get through ClickUp. Because otherwise, if you do it kind of halfway, you end up with the worst of both worlds. You end up with a system that, okay, maybe management is happy about it, but the individual contributors are thinking, okay, this is just too much admin for not enough, for not enough effect at the end of the day, right? So it's fascinating how whether you dig into business or operations or project management or so many other things, like it's what's happening in your head. It's the inner game. I remembered I wanted to drop that, the inner game. There's a book, The Inner Game of Tennis, which I'm fascinated by, haven't read yet, but this is what I want to talk about and like make people aware of. There's the inner game for any discipline, and you need to master that. And kind of wanted to leave that with the listeners here, as I assume we're going to be kind of winding down here. That that this is a crucial piece, and that's part of why I talk about mindset. And it's the same for, like you mentioned, for upsourced. It's a very interesting thought. That these are finances, obviously very like it's close to your heart in a sense. And with ZenPilot, we found that too.
Awesome. Well, no, I think that's a great way to kind of like a really good high note to kind of leave things on. And Kuba, I can't thank you enough. Like, thank you so much for just taking the time to talk today. And I appreciate you just sharing all this wisdom with the audience. And if people want to learn more about you, learn more about ZenPilot, like where should we direct them, and where should we kind of point them after this?
All right, so for me, I'm Jakub Grajcar. I'm primarily on LinkedIn, and you can see a lot of ZenPilot content on my profile right now. For example, I'm sharing the shorts from all of the webinars that I'm running. Well, not all of the webinars, some of them are closed, but live streams, some of the podcasts that ZenPilot hosts. There's a lot of it, and I write about a bunch of things: mindset, marketing, writing, being a creative. I should pick a lane. I haven't yet. So, just come along for the ride. It's all going to be coming from me. And for ZenPilot, just go to zenpilot.com, ZenPilot.com. And there's a cornucopia of things to grab there. If you're using ClickUp, we've got the ClickUp for Agencies guide, 47 pages, all about the ZenPilot system of using ClickUp that 2,700 agencies have already used, and to great effect. We've got the teamwork.com for Agencies guide, which is kind of the equivalent to the ClickUp for Agencies guide. That's also where you can sign up for the First Class Operations newsletter, which I, as we mentioned, host and share the best content from ZenPilot, great content from around the web about being a marketer, running an agency, running great operations, and more. And yeah, sometimes stories about my grandma, for example, but always with like a moral at the end of what this means. Like there's this really good one where my grandma made me think about what's important in business. And message me on LinkedIn. I will grab that edition of First Class Operations for you, because I remember which one it was. So those are the main places to follow me. Don't have like a personal email list yet. Maybe one day in the future. I would be very glad to get in contact with you. You want to talk marketing, you want to talk project management, you want to talk mindset especially, I'm there to talk.
Awesome. Cool. Well, yeah, we'll be sure to link to those in the show notes. And thank you again. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat today. Appreciate it. Thanks, Kuba.